Hey, on your God search, sometimes you're searching through mind and mind to try to find mind and realize that you've got to go beyond mind. Well, today's guest is someone who exemplifies that entirely. I'll tell you who he is in a second. But first, welcome to God Search. I'm Michael Shevack, and you're here to have the adventure, the experience that people call God. No one knows what God is. No one really has ever been able to define it. But it is agreed upon, if you get on your God search, that there are experiences that we can have in common no matter whether you believe in God or you're an atheist or whether you, whatever your religion is, there are certain common human experiences that are part of the experience called God. And that's why, now I reveal, his name is Dr. Andrew Ferber, MD, but more commonly known and better known as Swami Bodhichitta. Swami Bodhichitta, welcome to God Search. How are you?
I have no idea.
Exactly. Now, how does someone, you've had a very interesting God search. How does someone who is a psychiatrist and still practicing get to a point where ego and the development of a correct use of ego is so very important? Okay? Ex-medical student that I was, I know a little bit. And then you get to the point where the actual assertion of self becomes a spiritual betrayal. How does that happen?
I'm not sure what you want from me, Mike.
Well, what do you think?
Whole idea of a podcast, because I know I'm not fully enlightened. I know you're not fully enlightened. We're all talking about things that the enlightened beings say cannot be understood, that they're part of the great mystery of the unknowable. My own search started, I guess around 60 years ago when I woke up one night and there was this parade of people. And my parents, everybody their age, and I realized they're all going to die. The next night I woke up again and the parade was everybody my own age. And I realized we're going to die. And the third night was my kids and all their friends, and they were going to die. Fourth day, I was going into Long Island Sun swimming and it hit me like a lightning bolt. I'm going to die. And that started my authentic search. What's it all about?
It's a
I
pretty,
would
it's a pretty common experience if you look at Moses' experience of the death of the Egyptian, and you have the Buddha's experience of pain and suffering, where he has to leave the protectiveness of the palace where everything looks like it's perfect and no one's going to die. So your God search began when you were confronted with the limit of organic, basic material life, and did that begin a search for something more?
all about. I knew that I was a professor of psychiatry in a medical school, and I'd already written a telling book of family therapy. And all my colleagues, I knew they didn't know what it was about. And I knew the leaders in the field. And I was at the point where I could see where they were stuck and that they didn't know what it was all about. I started looking into what's meditation and who was in fashion at that point. And one day, my yoga teacher introduced me to this guy who just come back from India, who was a disciple of Osho's, one of his first ones. And I fell madly in love. I started listening to Osho, and that felt like that was going to get me there. I went up to a retreat with Chogyam Trungpa, the famous Tibetan Buddhist, and I was about 18 inches away from him, and I said, "You're not my guru." And he said, "That's right." That night I was in solitary retreat and just like floated down, surrendered to Osho. So I've been a disciple of Osho's for over 50 years now.
Wow, that's an amazing thing.
When I met him,
You were in California. You were at California at his ranch.
no, I met Osho and I'd already taken sannyas here in New York, the
Uh-huh.
center. But my first time I met him in Pune, I looked at him and I felt like I'd known him forever. I burst into tears and laughter, rolled across the floor, touched his foot. He said, "Come closer, Bodhichitta. Touch my other foot. I've been waiting for you." He touched my forehead. There were three explosions of light inside my being, whatever that is. And I knew in an instant that what I thought I was just a grain of sand on the beach. And what I felt was love, was a cupful in the ocean, and that it was all over forever. Only a few more details. I looked up at him. He says, "How long are you here for?" I said, "Government of India, the state of New York, and my family think 4 weeks. But if you have any more ideas, let me know and I'll take care of the details." He laughed and he said, "Neither the family, nor the state, nor the government have any control over you. You're serving a higher power."
Interesting. It's like the
Then he
American
said,
Constitution.
then he said, "Have you done any groups in the West?" I said, "I did all the groups because I was one of the leaders of New Age group therapies. Anybody who's working for psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, group therapy is doing my work. They awaken a thirst that only I can satisfy." And then I said, "I love you so much." And he said, "Eat me, drink me, breathe me, nourish yourself. You're part of my family." I wrote him that night, "Touching your feet yesterday was the most incredible moment of my life. How can I touch your feet every day? Can I live under your bed?" And he wrote back, "Let go is the way." And that's been my basic method 50 years, is exploring what let go means. Because it's a knack or a way of approaching whatever comes to mind, but it's not a doing. There's an understanding. Somehow, once one understands that something is useless, it lets go. You don't have to throw it away. And here I am 50 years later, practicing, if you can call it that, every moment. I've meditation on 5 continents, lived in ashrams in America and India for, I don't know how to count it, but at least 30 years. Because when I left in 2007, my wife developed breast cancer. So we had to come back to America. And I went weeping to Swami Chinmaya, who was the enlightened guy I lived with in India. He said, "You can't miss the ashram. You are at the point where the ashram is with you wherever you are."
Now, let
And
me ask you, you are how old right now?
91.
You're 91 years old and you do
Yeah.
yoga every day.
I do what every day?
You still do yoga every single day?
Yeah.
So you're an amazing testimony to the idea that the closer you get on your God search, to whatever it is, the more you reflect the eternity of that being, no matter whatever it is. I'm using your caveat with respect. So it's an amazing thing that the more you're letting go, the more you seem to be retaining youth and vibrancy, which, as how do you deal with this? The Did you find that this helps you as a psychiatrist, or do you find it conflicts with you as a psychiatrist? Do they, did you have to fuse the understandings to be a whole person?
At this time, psychiatrist is a costume I wear in order to share the amazing love that is available in communion with me.
Uh-huh.
And so, just all healers from all time in every country, the basic healing is a communion.
It's communion.
And however you conceive of the divine, that's what does most of the healing.
Mm.
The injection, the waving of flags, whatever the healer uses is secondary to the loving communion that if the patient allows it, and this applies all the way from veterinary being a disciple of a master. If the
So,
one who wants to be healed or
right.
transformed surrenders, the healing happens.
And does that include, so let's say I'm assuming you still prescribe medicine for certain people who might be helped by it.
I'm the chief medical officer in two clinics. I probably see almost 1,000 patients a year.
So when you give medicine, you give the medicine because it's functional, but you're aware that your communion with them is the real cure that's taking place.
Yeah,
That's the and how did you when I don't even know, how did you receive the title and from whom did you receive the title Swami? And frankly, I don't even know what the title is. I think I hear the word Swami and I think of a cartoon with a turban and they're blowing a flute and a snake comes up. What is it? What is it?
disciples, all facets of Hinduism and Buddhism
Right?
are called Swami. And it
Oh,
traditionally means one who owns himself.
interesting.
So all of Osho's disciples, the men are called Swami and the women are called Ma.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. I remember when I read Freud, I was really amazed. For some reason, I was drawn to the complete works of Freud when I was 11 years old. It was it was very strange. I hated day camp. It was boring, and I found the complete works of Freud on my grandmother's bookcase, and it kept me busy for a summer. And I'll never forget reading um, his quote that he said, "And ultimately, psychoanalysis remains a cure by love." When he was talking about the transference process and how
Mm-hmm.
the patient projects onto him the various unfulfilled pain from an incomplete sense of love. And he began to realize that he was not different than how you're describing yourself as a source of communion by which they could begin to, a mirror in which they could find their truer self. And I find that fascinating. I also remember once I got into a little trouble when I was younger, and I had a doctor who gave me some medicine, and he says, "I think this will help you." And when I went back to see him afterwards, he said, "Yeah, the medicine helped you because I can talk to you and I feel connecting to you. And that's how I know you're doing better, is that you and I are relating better and I can feel your presence more, whereas I couldn't feel you as much in the room the last time." And I always remembered that because these were people who seemed to be aware of the power of their selves. Since we are on a show called Godsearch, and by the way, go to yourgodsearch.com and all that stuff that people do and communicate with us. We're on a God search, and I think it's so fascinating to to realize that it's the communion that each person has that kind of is that mirror that sends that light out to other people, you know. I remember once I had to buy flowers for my mother-in-law, you know, and I went to the florist and I had this unbelievable craving. Bodhichitta, it was a craving. I had to touch her shoulder. And I couldn't, I was stopping myself from doing it because in this world, you're not supposed to touch women you don't know without asking permission. And it's a problem. And I just said to her, look, I'm a rabbi. I do spiritual stuff. You know, I patted it. And I said, I have to touch your left shoulder. Are you okay? And she broke down in tears and started to cry. And she says, no, I'm in excruciating pain. I said, can I touch you? I'm being told to touch you. So I, all I know is that whatever that person had, as if it was just hers, it became mine at that moment. And she needed me as her. Do you understand what I mean? She needed me as her, and I needed her as me. And that communion that you're talking about was just unbelievably instructive, very instructive. And I've never forgotten that. Like if I go into a grocery store, the checkout person I don't see as a checkout person who's just, you know, passing things by by the laser beam. I see them as little sources of radiation of that communion that you're talking about.
What I've come to understand that beings are part of a universal mind, an energy beyond our current conception and certainly beyond our able to measure it with either any objective or subjective tools.
Mhm.
That the basic problem is the idea of self, that
Not
the whole
self, but the idea of self or self.
self is an idea. There
Oh,
is no self. My master's last work is a series of discourses called the Zen Manifesto, Freedom from Oneself. I've spent much of my 65-year career exploring what the roots of the idea of self are.
mhm.
And there are biological ones, and then there are ones in the cosmos that are beyond my deep knowing that I have to be in my. But the biological ones are ignored by most so-called spiritual teachers.
Yeah, they are.
The animal, and certainly every mammal, but I believe it goes back even to birds and reptiles, born with a communion to its mother. And that energy communion is our deepest beginning of the idea of self, me and mommy. And it's hardwired in the nervous system. The same 7 functions of the nervous system with the same anatomy are found in all mammals. Searching, rain, fear, sex, seeking to be cared for and caring, and play. And the idea of self rose with always me and mommy is the basis of it. As this matures, our chimpanzee minds use the same social life as chimpanzees have. There's a gang led by an alpha male who's got a territory. And each chimpanzee from a different gang comes on that territory, we murder him. On the territory, we have a hierarchy of who takes care of who can eat the food, who can make love to who. You look at the series Chimp Empire on Netflix, you'll be so embarrassed because it's clear that 90% of human behavior is the same as chimp behavior. And my understanding of the idea of God is that societies evolved it probably 50, 100,000 years ago to be the alpha male. You're not alone because there's you and him or her or it. You get clear about how responsible you are for what this is in its oneness with the universe, is to
Right.
go beyond the idea of self, is to realize that self is a bunch of ideas built into your mammalian mind, but there's a wisdom and understanding that can see that and is beyond it and eventually comes to know that it's connected with everybody and everything else in the universe.
But would you say that individuality actually exists, or is it another idea that we tell ourselves?
It's another idea that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, I played with that thought a long time. I put in a good 20 years on that one. And I've come to and it could be delusional as I get older, you know, but I've come to the conclusion that that it's not. And let me tell you why. I have not found, as hard as I can, and I've tried, I really gave it a try, years. I have never found any two things that I can identify that are exactly the same. I mean, I've come to the conclusion that same is a human idea that doesn't exist. Okay. I can't find it. I mean, if I mix calcium and the sulfate, some of the calcium makes the compound, others don't. The 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 electron configurations are different, even if they have the same number of electrons. They're different. They are identical in that they have two, electrons that can bond. They have categories. There are dharmas, there are dharmas and categories. But sameness, I haven't found. And so I've come to the conclusion that individuality is in and of everything. And that's why it hides when you begin with spiritual development, because we're all, yes, in this incredible oneness. And because of that, we all share the same trait.
I agree that both are simultaneously there. Everything is part of everything, and yet no two things are alike. And
Yeah, that's my curiosity.
the whole idea of individuality is a concept.
That's where I'm beginning to change, and I'm beginning to think. And I say this with complete respect for your point of view, because I don't have a complete point of view. I just, play. It's my sandbox. I got my trucks and my pails and, you know, is that I've come to the conclusion that the amazing thing about the human being, slightly elevated chimp that we are, and I say this with due respect to those evangelical Christians who have very, very good reasons for questioning certain Darwinian theories. I say this with respect. I I think that what makes us unusual is that we can concentrate that quality in individuality that you say is part of and infused with indistinguishably as part of that one, that we can concentrate it to be able to have that idea of ourself as individual, to know that quality. And that's where I've begun recently to begin to change. In other words, my search for unity required me to find separation. It was I went to one polarity and bang, the other polarity, yin yang me. So, I mean, that's my thinking, you know. You think it's worthwhile?
Thinking itself is not worthwhile.
Interesting.
The essence of Buddhism is to live citta avarana, without thought coverings.
Mm-hmm.
It says that in the Heart Sutra.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, O Sariputra, all those beings who become enlightened in the three periods of time have relied on the utmost right and perfect understanding. They have lived citta avarana, without thought coverings.
Interesting. Yeah.
All the authentic traditions, insofar as there are any methods, they're to help you realize that you're this understanding that's aware of the thought coverings, but is not them. It's bigger than them, beyond them.
Right. And if you were
Like
aware of that, how would you treat your thought coverings differently?
the greater your awareness, the less you identify with your thought coverings.
So the issue is identification of the thought with the narrowness of the thought covering, not the thought covering itself.
You can't do anything with the thought covering itself.
Interesting.
But there's a mystery that we all more and more awareness. And it's analog, it's not digital. I can
Analog.
feel it increasing over the 50 years. And the growth now mostly is happening when I'm asleep. I often have conscious dreams. And sometimes recently, big chunks of what I thought I knew disappear. And there's a panic in the dream, like, you know, what will I do with
Without you,
that
without that.
idea? But when I wake up, I'm lighter, things are more beautiful and more mysterious.
Yeah, I noticed that. As I get older, all right, I'm a kid compared to you, but as I get older, when I lose a chunk of memory that I don't need anymore, I remember Krishnamurti saying, "Memory is incomplete experience." Well, when it goes, I realize, oh, I guess I completed that experience. But I notice that so much of it, when it goes, when it's ready to go, and I can't hold it on, it's really not needed much anymore. And if there is something I need from it and I can't recall it, I can just sort of ask for a petition and say, would you like send it back for a minute? I need something. And I don't know how long it will take, but 9 times out of 10, I get a little, bird with flapping wings, whispers something I used to remember, and it goes away and it gives me the little thing that I needed as a footnote, you know. So it's I think from a Jewish point of view, it's the principle is non-idolatry, meaning anything that's formed, such as a thought, is not representative of the power that creates it. Okay. And do not identify the form as the essence. And I think that's a very ancient thing. As but it's interesting to me in the Christological formulation, it's very much womb-like, where you have Christ and the Holy Spirit is one with God the Father, inseparably one, and you can't in the Catholic doctrine, not in the Protestant versions, they're slightly different. And I both the communion and the individuality to me are the combination of those two ways, and in a way I can't even put it together, is really what's remarkable to me. You know, I liked my mother. She was interesting, you know, and this is just such a more elevated version of thinking about mom, you know. So all right, you're on your God search. You're 91 years old. You're only going to live to about 300. Tell me what you have planned for the rest of your God search, if you have anything planned other than just being.
And that, my basic practice is let go is the way. You just put it, be here now. It's a let go. It's like you can tell each moment you need to let go and it lets itself go. It's just relaxing into the moment. Uh, the big problem with seekers when they get as far along as I am is the desire for enlightenment. That it's all your desire is still there, but it's hidden. Instead of desiring more money or more power, or prettier girls, you desire enlightenment. It's still desired is a problem. So once I'm aware of it, let it go.
Including the desire for enlightenment.
Yeah, what's going to happen is going to happen. I trust that.
So the identification of self with any object, including itself, prevents one from knowing whatever oneself is.
Or whatever that is,
That can't be known.
self is not.
And okay.
And I've known a few people like Osho and Krishnamurti, and you know, I know them so much vaster than I am at this point. So the things that I've understood from what they said, which I have not yet experienced.
Right.
And all I can say is it was the presence of these beings that led to this trust in me. It's not what they said, it's what they were and what I experienced when I was in the communion with them. And why some people are ready for these kinds of communions,
Mhm.
others are not, is a mystery to me. Because I've really seen tens of thousands of people and followed them for like 50, 60 years. And some expand and some
They expand and they shrink, they ossify, they tumble, they try to put it together.
it, the intention of the person to grow is the best predictor of whether they're going to heal in any therapy or grow in their spiritual search. And intention is impossible to measure, and yet we know when we have it. And if you happen to be a healer like you and me, you can feel it in another person. whether they're just going through the motions or there really is something in them that wants to grow, to blossom. And you can't fake it. Sometimes you can help them take away blocks. Like I've come to see that 90% of so-called psychological work in therapy is letting go of blocks, loving yourself unconditionally. That all of Judeo-Christian Islamic society for the past 5,000 years says you're born in original sin and you can go to hell unless you're judging every second. That's right, that's wrong, that's good, that's bad. If you're judging every second, you can't love yourself unconditionally.
Right.
And nobody is brought up with unconditional love. What's called normal is about 50% depression and continuous,
Self-abuse.
yeah.
Yeah, I call that, and when I'm with some of my students, I just call that a confusion between spiritual and moral thinking. And it's the you have to be, and Godsearch is about this. You know, you have to put the moral thinking, which has certain values into certain scales. You know, you don't go around eating babies. It's very nourishing, and I wouldn't say there isn't good in it. But you just don't go around taking babies from people and making sandwiches from them. There's a certain moral guideline that is useful in being passed down automatically and training people so they don't have to relearn that the hard way. Okay. But the moral thinking has to be based on a solid spiritual thinking, or what happens is the jurisprudence becomes, your lawmaker in heaven. Your Moses up in the sky. The sky falls and the Torah falls down. All right, rather than there being a compilation, the law of humanity becomes deified, and that prevents it, and it causes it to ossify. So there isn't in society, there is no growth as in the same in tandem with the spiritual growth of people. The laws do not grow at the same pace. So we wind up creating our own prison. The spirituality has to go before the morality. Once basic toilet training is in place, like don't kill little babies, or, you know, you know, respect your elders because they know a little bit more. But after toilet training, it can be a little bit of a problem. And I think what's needed is the scale of how you put these pieces together. That's my big word, scale.
This is a point in the conversation that I was afraid would come, but Osho's last three books,
Mhm.
I celebrate myself. God is nowhere. Zen is now here.
Sure.
The next one was entitled God is Dead. Zen is the only living truth. And the last one is the Zen Manifesto, Freedom from Oneself. In these books, it goes profoundly into that God is man's illusion that allows him to live without taking responsibility for
Sure.
his life. And I spoke earlier about how the idea of God evolved from our mammalian analogies, that we needed some authority because every mammalian group has got an authority. You watch anything, here's a gang of lions, there's a head of the pride, and there's this herd
Sure.
of 1,000 bulls, and you can see which of the bulls are in charge. Every organism has an innate morality. You have to go way back to crocodiles before somebody's eating their babies And even there, the mothers are defending the babies.
I had some cats that did it.
There is in life in a way that we can't understand where it came from, but we know it's there, some kind of morality that evolves from one species to the next. Exactly what's out there? Are there any other sentient, intelligent, communicating forms in the universe?
Sure.
Is beyond my pay grade. Uh, I've studied this whole system, human design. My son has been into it for about 15 years, and he really likes it, and he's the smartest guy I know. You know anything about human design?
No.
It's this guy, Uruhu, who was a nice Jewish boy from Toronto, who was a successful businessman and a hippie. He had this experience. He was on an island in the Mediterranean Sea, and the voice put him in a 9-day trance and gave him this whole system of how humans are either a design crystal and a personality crystal. These come from vast crystal bundles. And, you know, it's your design is formed at the moment of conception. It's an update on astrology, and it's very accurate in terms of describing how people's personalities are. I haven't spent thousands of hours on it that my son has, but I know the basics. There, one of the works I'm doing now is saying people are okay to do this extended DMT experience
Mhm.
down in the Grenadines. And the thing that people like DMT for is they say it puts them in touch with beings from other dimensions.
Sure.
So the question is that all a dream or is there really somebody there?
Well, again, what's a dream? Dreams do not take place out of context with some kind of order by which the dreams are constituted. And with all due respect to Osho, even falsity has to have a place in the design of something which is perfectly unified. So, you know, I just, pragmatically, my experience has been there are other beings besides myself here. And you out there, your God search may reveal that to you. It may not. I'm not setting any standards. It's your God search, not mine. But mine has at times revealed some rather unusual people speaking in languages that I should never know. And you know, I, I gotta have I think a reasonable theory is that someone's out there and there's a communion that's larger than me. It's a good working hypothesis, and I'm happy to have a better one if you can give me one. But that so far has worked, and I don't see any reason to extinguish the theory. But I'll take a better one if you got it, you know. So, all right. Well, look, we are running out of God search time, though actually it's only death, and God knows where we'll go from here. So thank you, Swami Bodhichitta. Dr. Andrew Ferber, MD, psychiatrist, 91 years old. I am envious. I got 20, I got 20, no, 19 more years to catch up to you. It's real, 19 more years.
Nothing is a competition. The whole idea of competition and accomplishment is part of the idea of God that
It's
I'm saying we have to let go of. that you're better than somebody or worse than somebody, that there's some standard you have to live up to,
It-
rather than
but
realizing you're just a flower. Each one is unique. Tune in and let yourself flower your own.
because competition in Latin comes from the same root word as competence. Isn't that amazing? And so you're the most competitive from a Darwinian point of view when you are flowering your fullest, greatest potential that's already laid into you. So I, you're preaching to the converted on that one. But I'm a competitive guy
I
from New
miss
York.
you. I'm so sorry that you're thousands of miles away instead of like I used to see you every
I,
summer when I go to
I will
lunches.
call you. This is a really great connection here, and I will use it again. To everyone out there, thank you on behalf of Swami Bodhichitta and myself, Michael Shevack, thanks for being here on Godsearch. Uncover God, discover God, and if you've been lost because of all sorts of crazy ideas that assume they know something when they don't know, and Dr. Ferber's email is Dr. No No, right? Nokno. And we'll put that on the screen for you. Don't get confused. Just as he said, set your intention to continue your God search and demonstrate to the entire world that your intention has power and let it bring you your own God search and your experience of God. Because I can't tell you what that's going to be. You're special and unique, but we'll all be there together. Thanks a lot. See you next Wednesday, about 5:45 Eastern Standard Time. Namaste.